is one of my favorite times of the year, because you can harvest all that bounty that you've grown all summer long and store it and eat it all winter long. And there's a lot of tricks to growing things, prepping them, and storing them so that they'll last longer through the winter time. And one of the easiest ones to do is squash. And I've got some samples of some different squashes here. One of my favorites, a butternut. I've got a buttercup squash, which these are two really good keepers. And this is a new one. This is called a kabocha. And the kabocha squash is an oriental type squash, but very tasty, and they keep really well also. Of course, there's a lot of other squashes, banana squash and Hubbard are great keepers as well too. So usually you want to start with a squash that's going to be a good keeper to begin with. And when it's time to harvest, it's usually really close to either our first frost or right after our first frost. And it just depends on how hard that first frost is. If it's going to be in the low 30s, maybe even slightly into the high 20s, that'll be okay. It'll just kill the vines down. Then you can go out and you can harvest your squash and start to prep them to store for winter. But if it looks like it's going to be a hard frost down into the mid or low 20s, then you want to harvest them before that frost. Otherwise, it could damage the squashes, damage the fruit, and then they won't keep as well through the winter time if you let them get damaged with that really intense cold that they can get sometimes. So, best thing to do is to take a pruner and again, just right after that first light frost or right before a really hard frost, I'll take my pruners, I'll trim off the top so there's about 2 inches of stem left on the squashes. And you can tell if they're ripe by scratching the outside of the surface of the squash with your thumbnail. And if you can scratch it and a little bit of moisture bubbles up, this is getting pretty close. You want a really hard exterior skin, so when I scratch that with my thumb, there's a little bit of moisture that bubbles up right in that area, and so it's not quite there. But these squashes are really starting to cure, and when you get that real hard exterior skin, then you know they're ready to go. But if you can still scrape them and get moisture to come up, they're not quite ready. But a lot of times you got to harvest them before they're ready to go. So I'll trim them so there's about 2 inches of stem left on the top. Take those, put them in a warm, dry location. Put them in the barn or the shed or the garage, somewhere where you've got good air circulation, but the temperatures are warmer. You don't want it too cool at that point. And then dry. You really want it nice and dry so you can develop that hard outer skin on the squashes. So then after they've been in that warm, dry location for probably 2 to 4 weeks, just depends on what the maturity is of the squashes when you first harvest them. But after that 2 to 4 weeks in that warm, dry location, then we're going to put them in our cool storage area. And the cool storage area should be somewhere between high 30s and high 40s. So 35 maybe at the lowest. We don't want it too cold so it damages the fruits, but probably in that 38 to 40 degree range up to about 50 degree range. And we want it to stay pretty consistent. We don't want to see lots of fluctuations. So generally a cold cellar down the basement if you've got a fruit storage room. Sometimes just in the crawl space underneath the house will work just great, but we want dry, a little bit of relative humidity, maybe 15 to 20% humidity, and really consistently cool, and that's going to be the best place to keep them. And for squashes, you want them on top of a crate or a pallet. So I've got a little crate right here, but we need that good air circulation to go around the squash through the storage process. And so you want them, sitting on a crate, and that's how they're going to keep the best, is on a crate or a pallet. So they've got that good air circulation, and don't let them like stack on top of each other, but they can be fairly close to each other. But if they're not touching, that's even better. That seems to help so that they last a little bit longer. So really easy to do the squashes. As for like say onions and potatoes, we've got onion sacks and burlap bags here at Anderson Seed and Garden that you can pick up to store your onions and your potatoes in. Potatoes are real easy to do, so all you need is basically some burlap sacks. Towards the end of August through the latter part of September, you can dig your potatoes up. Usually I'll try and do it really late in the afternoon. I'll dig those potatoes up, kind of smooth the dirt off the potatoes. A lot of times if we do it late enough, we'll let them sit out overnight so they kind of dry a little bit, because then when you pick them up in the morning, then you can rub that dirt off a little bit easier if there's a lot of moisture there in the soil. But depending on what your weather conditions are and timing and how much time you have, a lot of times we'll just dig the potatoes up, just kind of clean them off, throw them in a bag, and then we'll put them in our right directly into our cool cellar, into our 40 to 50 degree storage location. And if the bags aren't too heavy, you can hang them up on a nail. You want that good air circulation around those as well too. They're going to keep a lot better if you get that good air circulation around the potatoes. But the trick with the potatoes is they need to be stored in a completely dark location, because the light will make them turn green. So that's why you don't want to let them sit out as you're harvesting them for too long, because they'll start to turn green. So dig those up, maybe let them sit overnight, gather them up first thing in the morning before they get too much sunlight, and get those put away. Or you can just gather them up, put them right in the bags, put them right straight to your cold storage. Nice burlap sacks to store those with. The onions we do kind of similar to the squash. When the tops of the onions start to die down, that's usually about the latter part of August. Those tops of the onions will really start to die down, and then we'll go and we'll dig the onions up and we'll turn them upside down. And if those tops aren't dying down towards the end of August, sometimes we'll go through and we'll step on the tops to break those, to get them to stop growing. Then about a week or 10 days after that, then we'll dig the onions up, turn them upside down so the roots are exposed. And we'll leave those outside for a couple days with the root end exposed, so it'll dry those roots up, and it really stops that growth process of the onions. After the 2 days of being out in the garden, we'll gather those up, put them in the warm, dry location where we put our squash, so that they can just develop that hard outer wrapper skin that the onions will get. And we'll leave them there for about the same amount of time as the squashes, for about 2 to 4 weeks, so they can develop that hard outer wrapper skin. So we want that warm, dry location. If they get a little bit of sunshine, that's all right, but usually we want it fairly dark as well too. That's why the barn or the shed or the garage works really well. But warm and dry is the key for 2 to 3 to maybe even 4 weeks. Then when they develop that hard outer wrapper skin, then we're going to gather the onions up. I'll trim the tops off at that point, and then we'll take them and put them in a mesh bag like this. The mesh bags are great because of the good air circulation around those, and are perfect for the onions. So we'll put the onions in here, and then after that 2 to 4 week period of drying in the onions, hang them up on a nail in your storage location, and they'll keep for months, literally months. So onions are usually good for 4 to 6 months, and the potatoes are very similar, and the squashes, it just depends on the variety. So some varieties will maybe last 2 or 3 months, and some of the more firm, better storage squashes, they're going to last for 4 to 6 months also. So if you're harvesting in October, there's really no reason why you couldn't have some of those into January and February, and sometimes even into March, to enjoy throughout the winter time. So there's a lot of different things you can harvest in your garden, and prep them and store them through the winter time, and use them all winter long. Boost your food storage up and enjoy the fruits of your labors through the summer.